Welcome to today's episode of Make Shit Happen. Today's guest is Australia's most notorious criminal lawyer in Australia that needs no introduction to the people of Australia. Adam was a member of the armed robbery squad that was Queensland's youngest detective sergeant in a covert operation capacity. After completing his Bachelor of Laws, working full-time, he became a criminal defence lawyer representing some of the most high-profile cases that were seen all over the Australian news and media, generating extremely large attention to the cases and himself that he worked. After scoring some big wins and years of media coverage, Adam became one of Australia's most prominent and high-profile lawyers, operating and working in multiple jurisdictions. Adam worked with most of the major media outlets, both domestic and in international capacity, on Australia's most notorious crimes. Welcome to the Make Shit Happen podcast. If you're a business owner or aspiring entrepreneur who is ready to learn how to stop procrastinating and take massive action to start turning your passion into profit today, you're in the right place. I'm your host, Sam McLeod, real estate expert, six-figure coach, and champion athlete. And my goal is to equip you with the exact tools and steps to create massive success today. Let's dive in. Adam, just want to say a big thank you for coming on today.
No problems at all, mate. Thanks for having me.
No, good. Look, I thought we'd start just going into a bit around your background and your past. So, obviously, being a part of the armed robbery squad, you go into a bit of in-depth detail around how that kind of came about and what was that like?
Back in the day, and this is some time ago now, the armed robberies that we focused on were mainly banks, armoured vehicles, TABs and credit unions.
Yep.
So it wasn't your street robberies, but there was a massive influx in the late 90s and early 2000s, and the commissioner at the time obviously identified that there needed to be stopped because, mate, people were getting knocked, they were getting shot during robberies. It was getting out of control, and obviously with robberies comes firearms. Firearms are getting brandished in public. There was executions, everything. It was going very poorly. So Commissioner at the time made a decision to band together 10 guys out of the 10,000 police. Everyone had their own special skill set, and he put together 10 of them, and I was one of them.
Yeah, wow. So I remember you mentioning, you spoke to me about this about a couple of weeks ago, where you had one instance where you were chasing a group of guys that had performed a robbery. You were going after them, and you had a knife stuck into your vest. Yeah,
that was pretty embarrassing. You don't plan for these things, but there's been a lot of police that unfortunately have lost their lives as a result of it. You know, I never got badly hurt, and I was never put into that position, which was great. But you feel sorry for your brothers at the time that lay down their life, for the community. Obviously, they didn't set out there to do that, but you expose yourself to danger for long enough, that's what happens. And there's many incidents that we've been in, extracting armed robbers. Blokes wanted for murder all over Australia, and we'd get sent down to extract them. And look, you put yourself in jeopardy. You don't think of it at the time, but in hindsight, when you look back and you've got kids and you start getting older, you start thinking about these things, and it gives you a whole different identity and a whole different appreciation of things in hindsight, because times are changing. I don't know if they're getting better or worse, obviously, but back then it was pretty violent at the time.
How different is crime that you experienced back then in comparison to now in your head?
Yeah, well, I think crime it's relatively circular, and it always comes back on itself. There'll be a new drug, there'll be something new, there'll be a new problem.
Yeah.
In my day, it was small speed, heroin, all of that sort of stuff. Now we're starting to get into this ice epidemic and Fanta or whatever these new drugs are. I really don't even know what they are now, but obviously it just sort of comes in on itself, and it creates another problem. I think a big problem we've got at the moment is definitely ice, because there are a lot of drugs out there, both party drugs and otherwise. You can see and certainly understand why people use them, but those drugs, particularly ice, for example, there's nothing positive in any way, shape or form. It's just a family destroyer, soul destroyer, and it takes everything. And when you want to get a drug bad enough, you'll go and rob a bank or in these days, just rob a server. It'll be for $150. It's ridiculous. But you're that desperate, you're not thinking level-headedly.
What, because you hear about now in the news all the time about how many cars are getting stolen from people's houses and people going in and breaking in and entering and just to get access to a vehicle and to take, people's belongings and possessions for whatever reason. Did you guys ever have to deal with stuff like that back then?
We were focused more on the robberies of banks and armoured vans. And then tied up with murders and all of that sort of stuff. So I never really dealt with those sort of things. But, I know exactly what they're talking about. They stole my car from my Clark's place. Thank you, Nick Westcott.
Yeah. When did that happen?
Probably 2 years ago now. The new Mercedes. Nick had it, took it home to drive. He wanted to borrow it or something. And he took it home. And I got a phone call from the police at about 1 o'clock in the morning. They said, Magill, are you driving through Logan doing 180? And I went, what? And he said, well, 5 kids are. And they found about 2 weeks later, and it was full of, pipes and all that sort of stuff written off. But it was kids, obviously kids. And that's what's happening in Brisbane at the moment. And it's sad. And they're young and they're very brazen and they're violent. They're not scared to use weapons. That's terrifying. So I don't know what the government intend on doing about that. But that's something that's certainly got to be addressed because it's spiralling out of control. And they're not... you come across them and it's a 13, 14-year-old kid. Well, I don't know. Most men would obviously second-guess themselves so far as, hook it into them with a bat or whatever. Like if it was a grown man, you'd certainly do it to protect your property. But if it's a little kid, you'd think twice, and all of a sudden he pulls out a knife. And I think that's what's happening time and time again. So it's just it's a circular problem, and whether it be around drugs or whether it be around some other problem, a new problem's always going to present itself. I just think now we're faced with technology and we've got phones. Everything's pretty much recorded these days. That wasn't as existent when I was doing it, so we had to do it more. That's why we had to build relationships, very heavy relationships with informants and other police and members of the public. And they become so important because they become your eyes and your ears. Now your eyes and your ears are CCTV footage, phones, all the cameras all over the place. We didn't have that access back then. So they become far more important in developing and nurturing those relationships. And that from the police, went into law and continues into my business now. Yeah. It's just, to me, it's the number one thing that's got to be appreciated. And even if you can get on top and fully understand the importance of relationships, building, networking, whatever you want to call it, if you can get on top of that, if you can master it, you're there. Even if you're proficient in it, you're just about there. Because relationships and good, solid relationships where trust is built up and the rapport's developed and all of that sort of stuff. Once you're at that level, that can go through any type of business, and you can commute that to any business structure or any type of professional atmosphere that you want to put it into. But I use that heavily, and that's what actually taught me how to build relationships when I was in the police.
And going back to the armed robbery squad, can you recall, or what would be your craziest memory in your time in that?
Well, because we did a lot of work with the special operations groups, those guys they're just insane. They're trained killers. They're great guys, but they're trained killers, and we did so much work with them. Every time you're involved, we knew something fun was going to happen. So we did extractions out of Sydney. They did a heap of banks up here and fled down to Sydney, and we flew down in the government jet. We had to fly down silently because we didn't know if there was informants involved, giving them a heads up as to what we were doing. Yeah. These guys committed a couple of murders as well. So we had to go in the middle of the night. I think there was about 70 police, and there was about 8 of us from armed robbery up here, and I think there's about another 8 from, I think it was Sydney or Melbourne armed robbery that came over. And that was just hectic because these guys had, MP5s, AKs.
Full automatic weapons.
Full automatic weapons. Even their handguns, they were on trips. So they'd be shooting out, 50, 60 bullets on a full automatic load. So they didn't muck around. So that was trippy. That was good. It was really good fun.
Yeah.
But then you come back and you just realise that everyone come home, everyone was safe. It was fantastic.
So how did you, knowing obviously with the experience that you had, you'd be potentially encountering something along those lines.
Yeah.
How did you mentally prepare yourself for that?
Well, I think you had the advantage, again, I go back to relationships. You had a very tight relationship base with the guys that you worked with. Now, you know that you're working with the best of the best. It's as simple as that. You're an elite squad. You've been handpicked specifically for that purpose. So everybody that's in that squad is beyond competent. And then because you're working in such a small unit, you develop a very good, the bond is probably the best term, I think. It's an unbreakable bond. And you rely
like
on
a brotherhood.
It's big time. It was a brotherhood. I don't think it exists much anymore. I've still got a lot of mates in the coppers, and it doesn't exist as much as it used to. And I think that's society in general. But you have that, as you said, brotherhood, that deep sense of respect and trust with these guys, and you're all thinking about the same thing. You're all doing the same thing. Everybody's on the same page, and you execute it accordingly. So I think that's what gives you the confidence. And once you get a few of them under your belt and you've done a lot of big jobs, it's just another thing. You're just practicing your art. That's all you're doing. It's just practicing. And you get better and better at it. You get better at interviewing people. You get better at negotiating with probably, Australia's worst, most violent criminals. They'll be eating out of your hand in half an hour if you can do it right. And it's an art and it's a talent, and it's got nothing to do with academics. It's got nothing to do with your studies. It's a thing that you develop when you're exposed to good people over an extended period of time that teach you things, and you pick up things which they sort of convey in their personalities. You might pick something up and use a particular trait that they use on a daily basis. Something else you mightn't gel with, but you might pick up a couple of things, and then you develop your own way of communicating with people. I'm a big listener. I like listening first, and then asking about it after. You have a lot of people these days that you engage in conversations, and the first 5 minutes is about them. The next 5 minutes is about them, and the 5 minutes after that is just summarising everything about them. Yeah. So you can't, there's no intelligence in that. I think to negotiate, to build relationships, to just to be able to get to know people, listening is so underrated, so underrated. And when I was in armed robbery and even in the law, it's very difficult for these people to talk about some of the things that are done, and they're simply horrendous. Like, to sit down and say that they've removed somebody's head. I'm sorry, that's a tough thing to talk about. And the fact that you've developed a rapport with them and a relationship that they feel as easy as they possibly could to talk about it over a period of time, you just watch the floodgates open. So imagine that, and that transcend that into every aspect of business. And you listen to people, they get the trust, and all of a sudden it comes out, and then they put you up on not a pedestal, but they love doing business with you. You'll always have repeat business, and the word that's going to come from them is just going to be accolades.
So was there times where you heard things and you felt sick to your stomach and you had to walk away? Or
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think you wouldn't be human to think otherwise. I'm a dad. I've got 3 beautiful kids. You sit back and you know what some of these people have done, and you've got to keep it together and remain relatively vanilla, because if they see that judgment coming across, you've lost them.
Yeah.
Because they'll test the waters, and they might even say things just to antagonise you, but they'll do it to test the waters and to see if you jump. If you do, you've lost them. You can't get them back. And some of the things that I've heard in the interviews and everything that I've conducted over the years and years, it makes you sick to your stomach. And I have nightmares about it. And I'm sure I've had some degree of PTSD and all of that sort of stuff. Like a lot of coppers and everything that have experienced that sort of stuff. But in the same breath, it's all a part of the game. You know that you're doing it. It's a conscious decision to do it. And you do it for a purpose, and that's
for the greater good.
For the greater good, but also to get them to open up on a subject which is clearly not a good subject that anyone would want to talk about openly. Very, very difficult thing to do.
In your training, they would have obviously helped you combat with dealing with things like that. Was there any particular thing that stuck to mind in terms of that you had to kind of remind yourself in the situations to keep you cool and you calm? And
I think the people around you.
Yeah.
I don't think training can really. What training can do is identify certain things that are going to come up now and then, but as how you address it and how you receive that information and process it and deal with it, that's a real personal thing. And I think that comes down to a heap of things like age, your personality, whether or not, if you're a true believer, give it up. Like, really, you're a fucking idiot. If you're a true believer, it just doesn't work. But if you have that, if you're aware of what's coming on, you've got good people around you, they'll teach you. It might either be through direct methods of, supervision and teaching you, or it just might be just a bit of a chat over a beer, and you pick it up, and then you develop it into some new tool that you can put in your toolkit. So that's how you develop that particular talent and art. Like, you'll see some guys, and many good mates of yours and mine, they've got an amazing capacity to talk. They can talk underwater, but if you see what they're actually doing, it's far deeper than that. Good mate of ours, Brendan Tutt, one of the genius in property in Brisbane, as far as I'm concerned, unbelievable individual with respect to relationships, professional and personal, unbelievable. I've never seen anything like it. He's a freak, and I've stolen a lot of his traits and actually moved that into mine. And then you present it in a different way. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just talking on that quickly, I know Brendan's B2B skills is where I learned basically most of the things that I learned about property. And
exactly.
That man taught me most things I know today when it comes to how to run a B2B business and actually nurture and look after the relationships that you have and to actually develop them a lot further. And he's a absolute weapon when it comes to that.
Yeah, and it's a lot tougher than what people think, because you've got to listen to what they say. You've got to assess what you've heard. You've got to see how you can relate that to the relationship. Then you've got to think anything I say is going to affect, moving forward with respect to that relationship. There's a lot of moving parts in it. It's a very difficult thing to master, and not many people do it. Not many people do it.
So, and one thing like you and I have been friends for quite some time now.
Yeah.
And one thing I always say about you to a lot of people is, regardless of what you see and hear, the guy's got a heart bigger than his fucking head, and he's one of the most generous and most nice people you ever meet. But the one thing I admire about you the most is your wit. And some of the shit that comes out of your mouth, it's those one punch liners that you say that get me every time. And mate, to be honest, like, that's one of the things that I've learned from you is, how you talk and how quickly you respond to things. When someone says something, you just come straight off the cuff every time. Where did you get that from?
I think it was a trait I developed over time, but I think when you're hanging around people of all a similar type, you've got to be quick, otherwise you get eaten up, and you've got to respond quickly. And I think that's a trait that sort of, again, transcends into other areas, like your ability to think on your feet. Because you can say anything, but if it doesn't make sense or you don't hit the punchline, it's shit. It's a terrible comeback. I go, leave it, mate. You sound like a fucking idiot, But when you're hanging around people and you're close with these people over years and years and years, you develop it, and you've got to be good. Otherwise, you just getting eaten up by these guys, and that's in the police, in the law, in property. Every man, and there's different people, and we've got a lot of good mates that are very witty, and if you're not quick, and they won't let you forget it either.
Nah, they always bring it up.
Yeah, I
know. Just one last thing, finishing on the force with. How, being involved in it for as long as you were, and obviously now obviously shifting over to law, how different do you think the force is from when you were in it to what it is now? See,
I was a little bit luckier because my father was in the police for 35 years, so I grew up with the detectives my whole life. That's the only thing I ever knew, is that police detectives were always at my house, and I grew up with them, so. It was second nature to me going into it, but I realised at a certain time, and I was young enough to think, well, I've pulled all of these and developed all these tools over this period of time here. I don't want to tick the box again. I've already done it. I want to move on to something else.
Yeah.
And it wasn't purely a financial decision, because it's massive differences in the finance side of things. It had nothing to do with that. It was, I've always wanted in my life to help people. So if you figure out what you want to do, I think what you end up doing and everything is a very distant second. And I've always wanted to help people. I still to this day, I get a kick out of it. And whether it be when I was in the police helping people and, you know, locking up crooks and all that sort of stuff, to going into law and helping people when they get into strife, you know, it makes you feel good looking after people. And we're of service, and serving the people in the community and serving your mates, and someone just needs a hand, or even just 5 minutes, they just say, mate, can I just run something by? It doesn't cost you anything except for a bit of your time to help that person. That might make the biggest deal in their life for 5 minutes in your time. Yeah. I think that that's the biggest thing that changed, because I think police these days, because the police don't interview many people anymore, you know, therefore the negotiating skills aren't as good as they used to be, because everything's on camera. You know, you get into a fight, you know, something happens. The coppers don't need to talk to you because it's all on video. They don't care what you got to say. Yeah. Back when I was doing it, there might have been video. It certainly wasn't the quality that's around now. So you've got to elicit admissions and stories from people that just fucking hate you and they want to kill you. So you've got to turn them around and not only make them like you, make them, more importantly, trust you, and then over that, get them to talk about things that they want to take to their grave. A very difficult thing to do. The police, as far as I see now, that is something which it was just a day-to-day thing when I was in it. Now I just think now it happens very seldom. That's the biggest difference.
And did you, when you were seeing people, you know, whether it was on the streets or with the jobs like that, did you ever have people that were trying to make you feel like that you could trust them, and then they turned around and stabbed you in the back?
Oh, absolutely. I think that's people in general. Yeah. I don't think it's just, you know, criminals. I think that's a lot of people. And, you know, we know people both in a professional and in a personal sense that there's not much depth. If you don't have much depth, you don't have that capacity to be empathetic, to be caring, to actually be genuine in what you want to portray, whatever you're doing. Yeah. And so people will be nice on the outside, and if a situation suits them, they'll flip and, you know, give you shit behind your back because it suits the scenario. Whereas, you know, if you do have that depth and you've got that, you know, you've got that quality of person, you know, you don't do that. And I see it a lot. And I certainly don't think it's just restricted to criminals. I think it's more prevalent with businessmen. Yeah. Because they've got an angle in it. You know, they might miss out on a deal, and if the difference is putting shit on you and potentially being in better stead for some transaction, they'll do it every day of the week. Yeah.
And speaking of business, you transitioning from the force over to law, like why the shift and how did that happen, and what was your mindset around why you wanted to change?
I think it was, for me, I took as much as I could, in my mind at least, from the police, because it wasn't just the 10 years I did in it, it was the years I did growing up with it as well. Yeah. And so, and that played a massive role in my life, but I still had a lot of love for the force and still do this to this day, and there's some awesome people in there. But for me, I got to a stage where I thought, I can do something better to help people. I can do something better to help to be where I want to be, and I just didn't see it in a government role. I think it was too structured around. You know, you're a government employee, you got too many restrictions. We're in the private enterprise, it really opens up, and, you know, you've got that, you know, if you're a little bit, not so much flamboyant, but if you're a little bit left of centre or, you know, eccentric in certain ways, I think that's far better in the private realm as opposed to the government one. I just saw that there were going to be more opportunities for me to do that in the private sphere. So I sat down with my father and, you know, we talked about it, and I thought about everything. I was going to talk about doing medicine and et cetera, all of these sort of things. and he decided law, and that's the path that I went. And look, I loved doing law. I loved it. It was great. And I'm having a break now, but because I've worked my whole life.
Yeah.
But it's, I really enjoyed it. I met wonderful people. Oh, don't get me wrong. I met some dead shits, absolute fucking grubs. Yeah. But I met some wonderful people to this day, of friends for life. My family went into it. My nephew's, he's a lawyer now. It's one of those things that goes through your family, and it does. You are absorbed into it. But I think a trap, and I fell into this when I was in the police. When you're in there, because they're the only people that you think understand, that becomes your friendship group. Yeah. And I think that's a big mistake. Yeah. I think putting the blinkers on and living in that, you're too restricted. You're not seeing things globally. You've really got laser beam focus on one sort of direction, and all of the input that is happening in your life are from people of a similar situation, and there's no room to grow. Yeah. And that's when I went into law. I made sure, even though I was good mates with a lot of the lawyers, I still kept all of my relationships from school, a lot from the coppers, you guys in property and development. I made sure that I was more well-rounded, and I didn't want to be compartmentalised and pocketed in, that your only group of friends or the associates you hang around with are just lawyers. Yeah. So I made a conscious effort to make sure I never did that.
So you've obviously transitioned from the coppers, getting into the force. You've now become, when you started up until today, you're now one of the most, prominent criminal defence lawyers in the country. You've had a lot of high-profile cases that have been in and out all over the media outlets, the papers, everything. How did you build up your career where you got yourself into a position where you were dealing with these high-profile cases?
Mate, relationships again.
Yep.
Relationships, and I mean relationships across the board. Like, a lot of the work that comes in is referral-based.
Right.
So you've got to have, because it's like anything, mate. You refer someone to a professional to do a certain job, it's sort of your name on the line in that respect as well. Yeah. So you want to make sure that if someone's going to do it, the relationship's solid enough and they know you well enough to A, they're going to do a good job, B, they can trust you in the scenario that they're in, and C, you're not going to take the piss, you're not going to rob them blind for fees and all of that sort of stuff. It's a lot of things are taken on board, but I build up all relationships in the media, in the criminal underworld. I built up relationships there. Always had relationships with the police. But just be upfront, be honest, because some of the stuff you're going to tell them is not going to be good news, and you're selling them a shit sandwich. Yeah. So it's very hard to say, look, mate, it's not looking good, but you're only going to do 25 years, you'll be fine. Fuck that,
Only 25.
No worries. That's terrible, but if you're up front, you break the egg in the beginning. Yeah. And then you just spend time massaging it and say, righto, what can we influence? What are the things we can do to put ourselves in a better position? Sometimes you just can't. Yeah. But a lot of times, if you're smart enough, you identify not the holes in the law, but opportunities present themselves. And if you can deal with them and you can identify them and then execute it properly, you get a great result. Now, that word gets out there. That word, that the fact that you're good at what you do, and you're a good guy, easy to talk to, trustworthy, all that sort of stuff. Then you're on the media, and then it's tabled all across Australia on every media source there is. Your name gets out there quick, and then people meet you and they actually realise, you're a decent sort of, you had a beer with them, decent bloke, and have a chat. So you don't have your head stuck up your ass. People think just because you're competent in what you do, and you've got good skill set, like you're smart, you're a lawyer, you're a doctor, whatever, that's what'll breed success, mate. That's just a very small part of it. If you don't have that capacity to build relationships and trust, if you're talking to, I'm 50, I'm an older guy, talking to a young bloke and he wants to know about the things you've done in law, if you give him 5 minutes of your time, which is 5 minutes, and make him feel like a king, you have got a supporter forever.
100%.
Now, that young bloke might end up being a Supreme Court judge. like for the purpose of 5 minutes of your time. You've built a relationship. He'll go out there, he will sing accolades about you to every man and his dog. Now, imagine if you did that 3 times a day when you're out and about, whether, we're having it at a restaurant or we're at work or we're at a bar. I do it 3 times a day.
Every day?
Every day, 7 days a week.
Wow. So talk me through that. How does that work?
Well, I made a mental note because I wanted to do something that was attainable and I could do it all of the time. Like, if you give yourself an outlandish figure, like, I'm going to do it 10 times a day, mate, you're fucking exhausted.
Yeah.
But, you go down to the coffee shop, you meet someone at the coffee shop, it could be an old guy, have a chat with him for 5 minutes, you've made his day, it's taken 5 minutes out of your time, it costs you nothing. Being a good bloke, and I'm saying a good bloke, it's free, it costs nothing. So you've given 5 minutes out of your time. He's left. He's in a better state. He's up because you made him laugh and have a giggle and all that sort of shit,
Yeah.
And they've left elated and they go off elated and you've helped someone, even if it's for a short period. So I do that, and then I meet people, in a business sense or in a social sense or whatever, and I always specifically talk to them one-on-one. And I wanted to get to know them a bit. Ask questions about them. Don't tell them about you. Yeah. Ask questions about them. They already know about fucking you. That's why they want to talk to you. You don't need to tell them you sound like a dickhead. It's very offensive to do that. They know who you are, but you don't know who they am. And they would be thrilled if you're asking those questions. And it took you 5 minutes? You had to have a beer with him?
Yeah.
Mate, fucking how hard is it? It's not hard.
And the other thing too is you don't know who their family is,
spot on,
who their grandfather. You've got no idea. Like there could be other connections there, like you said, that might serve a purpose later on.
Absolutely,
and that's not the reason why you do it. It's just purely because
it happens.
Yeah, exactly.
It happens.
So if you were to put a percentage on relationships and what you're talking about with future pacing of taking just 5 minutes out of your day to talk to people you don't know.
Yeah.
What percentage would you give that has had a direct connection with your success in your career?
I think you don't know that because you don't know who they've spoken to.
Yeah.
Because it might be, 5 runs down the tree where, the 5 people they've spoken to might need your help with law, might need your help with business, might need your help with whatever it is, whatever the problem is that needs to be fixed. You might not directly know about it, but I knew particularly when I was really strong in the law, it always came through a referral. So you knew it came from something originally doing exactly what I said. I don't know at what point, because I was doing it so often.
Yeah.
I actually used to do it because I was, trying to get my name out there originally and all that sort of stuff before I got traction. I did it more. I made more of a conscious effort of it. But as you get people know, your name gets saturated, whether it be in the community or on media or whatever, everyone starts to know who you are, and that's fine. But I know I did it more because I was more focused on building the positive relationships, and I never.
I think he's listening,
Brendan Taylor. I bet you're listening, you bastard. And I think when it comes to those things, you're more conscious about it, and you actually get better at it.
Yeah,
you get better at it.
Yeah,
and you've left a conversation, and they'll think, "Hang on, the only thing we talked about was me," and that's what you wanted. But they've got to impart something about them to you. I think it's very, very important. And the only way you can do it is listen first, ask them questions, get them to talk about it, pick a couple of things that you like or that you think you can expand upon, or something that they're clearly passionate about.
Yeah.
Get them to talk about them. And it's for 5 minutes, mate, really.
Yeah.
How much of a difference can it possibly make to anyone's day 100%. To do that? Yeah. And then you've just sparked up somebody, and straight away they'll leave that scenario that you're in and sing your praises.
So, and mate, that's spot on. I agree with everything you've said there with, relationships are, especially in what you and I do, it's everything.
Yeah.
And taking it to business, it's highly, highly important that you make a conscious effort to do things like that on a daily basis.
Yeah.
When it comes back to, the criminal law and the underworld, like you were describing it before, what were some of the, things that stood out to you that you learned very quickly dealing with, those types of people being in that industry?
It depends on sort of who you dealt with. Like I acted for the Russian mafia, 5T, which is the Asian mafia, numerous bike gangs, a lot of organised crime in Sydney and Melbourne. I worked with all of those guys. Everyone had a different, like a nuance. Everyone was different. But they all had a very common thread in that if you showed respect along the way, you always got it back. And I think that was a very common thread. Like the way you would act with the Russian guys, you certainly wouldn't act around the Asian guys. Different, two totally separate creatures.
So I got to ask you, like how? So for instance, let's talk about the Russian mafia, right?
Yeah.
Crazy organisation, and obviously what they do, and obviously it's got a bad rap for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
But how do you get in touch, or how does an organisation like that get in touch with you to set up a meeting to talk about business?
They ring you and they say, "We've been referred. Can we have a sit down?"
Right.
And that's what it starts, mate. I wouldn't know how to contact them. Like they're the ones that reach out to you. They came up here and they hired up the top floor of the Marriott just for us to have a meeting.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
How long ago was this?
That was probably 2012, 2013, something like that.
Yeah.
And they just hired out the entire floor.
Wow.
And we had a meeting, went for an hour, and I don't know what they did, but they had all the guns and all that sort of stuff there, but they weren't there to intimidate because they knew that I was there to help.
Yeah.
So they didn't want something from me other than the potential of me helping them.
How many different hierarchies were in that one room?
Hard to say, but you're only talking to one guy.
Yeah.
You had the security details, and obviously they were at lifts and at windows and all of that sort of stuff.
Full quid.
Everything. Yeah, there's probably 10 of them, I guess, 10 security.
Wow.
The main guy I was talking to and another fella, they were the money men, and you can tell that they're the ones that pull the strings. But very gently spoken, very respectful. Just wanted to know, they proposed and put forward some scenarios, and I had to sort of put forward a proposition as the best way to deal with them. They liked it, and that's how it started.
And was that a long-standing relationship from then onwards?
Yeah, and it's sort of, but what happens is the heads change.
Yeah. And
the heads change, and they'll move to, like, probably had a better contact or a better relationship with another lawyer.
Yeah, correct.
And so that's how it works. So, as I said before, these things are very cyclic. You can't be the most prominent lawyer in Queensland and Australia and expect to keep that forever. It's arrogant, and it's just not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. There's always going to be someone that's a bit better than you, better networker than you, better negotiator than you, might be across the board better lawyer in all different aspects, or whatever particular type of business you're involved in. But you've just got to make the best of it as long as you can, and impart good things on people along the way. That's the way I look at it.
Did you walk out of that meeting with a bit of a fucking shiver going down your spine?
Oh no, I shit myself.
Yeah,
I was terrified.
Mate, I'm just thinking, like, what the normal person would be acting like, walking into a room like that, knowing who they're going to meet, and again, like, not expecting or knowing what that interaction's going to be like.
Look, you come across them. I had another one. I had to go meet Vietnamese organised crime guys in Melbourne, and we ended up going to a dog race park outside near an airport. I don't even know where it was. It was 9 o'clock in the morning, and the average age of these guys sitting down was probably 180 each. They were fucking old. And no, they were just old blokes, but they had their minders, and they all had guns and all the rest of it, at this restaurant near a dog track at 9 o'clock in the morning.
They obviously own the bloody track.
Mate, I didn't ask. I'm in a different state. Yeah. My weapon was a fucking HB pencil.
Oh, perfect, mate.
You know
just
what I mean?
Unscrew the lid, off you go.
Oh, mate, dead set. I couldn't box fruit. So and then that sort of thing happened. You speak to them, and, I had the additional problem, and there's the language barrier as well. So, we had a guy that was interpreting for us, and I'd say something, he'd interpret it, they'd answer it, and because there's 5 or 6 guys at the table, they'd have their little opinions or the bits they want to throw in. And that would have to be interpreted back. So it was a pretty hard slog for a couple of hours while we're sorting out things. And it was another thing. They come to me with problems, and I'd put forward propositions and the best way to deal with it, and they decided to deal with me. So, but then whenever that was 10:30 or whatever, the old blokes just brought out all this piss and started drinking. I was spastic, and I was eating fucking raw jellyfish and shit.
Raw jellyfish.
Yeah, straight out. I was terrible.
Jesus Christ.
But I just thought, no, just do it.
Just do it.
Just look straight ahead.
Don't offend them.
Don't offend them.
Yeah.
You know. Oh, it's lovely. I'm going.
Oh, it's great. What a delicacy.
Yeah.
Mate, looking back at all those things that you've just discussed then and all the things that you've experienced, is there one particular case, obviously without mentioning names, but is there one particular case or I guess event in your law career that kind of sticks out to you that was one of your biggest cases and I guess one of your biggest like learning curves or experiences that you had?
Yeah, there's different anomalies that will impress upon how a case sticks in your mind. Like it might be huge, like when I acted for the prince that ripped off Department of Health. That was all across the world. But it was
You acted for the prince?
Yeah. So, fraud, ripped off, I think it was state health for 15 million or something like those sort of things. But that was throughout the world. But the case itself was very simple. You know, he signed some checks that he shouldn't have. He got the money and he spent it. Mate, it's not fucking hard. So the case, but I'm saying the media notoriety from that, just jettisoned me into international media. And,
yeah, wow.
I was all over all the American media and, all throughout Europe and all of that sort of stuff because I guess it was sexy for them, someone acting as a prince and,
So how did... Where was this happening at the time?
Brisbane.
In Brisbane.
In Brisbane, yeah. So he was one of the executives, I believe, in Queensland Health, signed some checks, and the system at the time wasn't recognising the fact that the checks were coming through the back door to him.
For 15 million.
Yeah. So, and he had a good time.
Oh, mate, I would too.
He had a good time. So, you see, that sort of thing, that's not a case, but that's just the media notoriety that just jettisoned my name throughout the world. So that was that sort of thing. But it's the ones which are, mate, I had a lady that was done for a murder. She was subject to domestic violence, horrific stuff, terrible stuff. And she ended up shooting the husband, burning the body, and then having a backhoe spread the ashes.
Having a what?
The backhoe, a truck spread the ashes over the yard. Yeah. So anyway, somehow there was a guy involved in it. He helped her in some way, shape, or form. It come forward. They charged her with murder. We got her off everything. But that was very interesting. But it was actually the best result, even though it's terrible to say someone lost their lives. What this guy did to this poor lady over an extended period of time was just horrendous. I don't blame her what she did, and obviously the jury thought that too. And that's the way that things came back, and we were fine at the end of the day. But the poor bugger still had to go through 3 years of hell, and immense amounts of money. For something really for protecting yourself. Yeah. So that really stuck out on my mind. And I felt my heart was just in for this lady. You can tell that she was a struggler. She'd had a tough. This prick had just totally abused her sexually, physically, every bad way you could possibly imagine. Mate, ticked every box. And this poor darling had to go through all this. And then on top of that, having to deal with that mentally, had to fucking go through a murder trial, for 3 years. So that sticks out a lot. And she was a lovely, lovely person. But yeah, that was very memorable for me. And it was the law behind it that we won it on, which I liked.
Evolving and changing. How different is the law now compared to when you were in it?
Well, look, I think you're always going to have legislative changes, and it's because of community expectations and all that sort of stuff. People are going to, something new is going to happen. Like obviously we've had all these changes to DVs, and so it should be. Girls and guys have got to be protected, and that's just life. And that wasn't always the way, but obviously it's become more identifiable now, and so the legislature thought they had to do something about it, which they've done. I think that the laws I think they get it right most of the time. I think they do. Look, they're always going to fuck up now and then. You can't be infallible.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, judges are still human. Magistrates are still human. The juries, you don't get to know what juries talk about in the jury room. So fucking who knows what they're talking about?
Yeah.
And so, you're not going to have decisions which are always going to be right. It's certainly not an infallible system. But by and large, I've had results where my guy's clearly fucking done it.
Yeah.
But I got him off.
Yeah.
And then I've had other times where I honestly believe my guy didn't do it and he went down. So you have those things, and that's just a part of the legal system. They can't broadly get everything right.
Because you hear about these cases where, in the States and stuff, where these guys are going in for murders and things like that they didn't commit, and they've been in jail for 25, 30 years, and they finally get resolved that they didn't actually do it, and then they get released.
You're fucked, mate.
Yeah.
How can you... all the money in the world can't give you back that time. If you wanted to have kids, mate, you want to have family, you as a person, there is no way you can grow in jail over that period of time like it's as you would out here. It's just you can't give that back. And even if they do split with the millions of dollars to say, look, we're sorry, well, it's fucking a little bit too late. They can't. You can't give that back. And I don't think it's as prevalent here in Australia, but in the States it are. But their fucking laws are all over the place. They got no idea what's going on.
And when it comes to your day in, day out work, like how do you personally keep yourself sharp on the ball and make
having
sure
smart ass mates?
like myself.
Yeah, and just having you're always got to be on. You've always got to be on. And since having a break from law and all of that sort of stuff, that's not what keeps you sharp. What keeps you sharp is as I said before, going back to relationships, maintaining your relationships. Relationships are like plants, mate. You've got to feed them.
Yeah.
If you don't feed them, they'll starve and they'll die.
Yeah.
You've got to feed them. Even if it's a phone call to check up and say g'day, a couple of minutes out of your time, you've got to feed them. And that's relationships at home with, my 3 kids worship them, absolutely worship them. And I'd like to think that I'm a really good dad, and I think I could be better, but, I want to make sure that at any time in their lives, any one of my kids could call me at any time and I'm there.
Yeah.
Now, the only reason they could feel that is because you've got a good relationship with them. And I've got mates, their kids don't do that, and that's fucking sad. But you've got to work on it. You have to keep on working on it. And the only thing that relationships really need is time. That's all you need is time, because if you give it time, you've already developed the relationship, so you're just going to maintain it. But if you don't give it time, the relationship will fade.
Yeah.
And whether it be of a private capacity or a personal one, it's the same result. It'll wither and die.
Yeah. And obviously getting into COVID quickly with, how that's changed the business landscape in such a major way, where people are used to doing business face to face, like yourself, like myself as well. How do you see COVID's changed your landscape in that respect? Well,
I think what I experienced through COVID is that it was weird. Firstly, like not being at home all the time. It's like, don't get me wrong, it's fucking. I love it. Well, I love being a dad. I want to stay home and be a dad. That's it.
Yeah.
But I love it. But it was weird at first. But people got over that hurdle because you know what? You developed a new skill. Now, whether that skill be fucking Zooming or whatever this shit's called, you know me, I'm not good with it, mate. Whether it be that sort of thing or whether it be, when you do catch up, you make the time that you're together with people, more quality time. I think you develop new skills, and this wasn't just me. This was everybody. Everyone had to do it. Everyone working from home, and I'm telling you. You see the state of commercial buildings. Oh, more than anyone. The state of commercial, leasing in the city. It's shit.
Yeah.
Because people are working from home. They don't need to go to work.
No. Well, that's the thing. The landscape in business has made that easier in some regards, but also harder in others. Where some people are happy to stay at home and some people don't want to.
Yeah.
But you don't necessarily have to go out there now and meet people face to face to do business for the first time.
Yeah.
Now, because when I first started with Tuddy, for instance, and you wanted to try and deal with the number one group, or the group that had the best reputation for the highest amount of deals per month or per annum, You had to get in through the door, go through the gatekeeper. You know, you had to build rapport through ways in which you couldn't directly speak to the person you wanted to speak to. You had to go through other avenues.
Jump the hoops.
The hoops, yeah. And with COVID, I feel like that's completely removed every barrier that was previously there, because now people are more open to talking to people they've never spoken to before. They're willing to have meetings with people they've never spoken to before just by Zoom, because they don't physically have to spend their time to get there to meet the person.
Yeah.
They can just jump on a computer and talk for 5, 10, 15 minutes, whatever, and discuss business.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think the mold's been broken now. You know, like in a whole new hybrid's been created.
Yeah.
You know, in a business sense, and now it's been normalised. That's the best thing, I reckon. It's been normalised, these Zoom meetings. You know, all the communication. It's actually been normalised. Whereas once upon a time, you know, it doesn't matter if you're in law, property, no matter what business, it had to be face to face. Now people are. I think face to face is on the out.
Yeah.
You know, like it's just on the out, because they've realised the convenience which is supported by Zoom meetings. You can fucking put in 10 Zoom meetings in a day, whereas if you're doing that in person, you'd knock off 2 or 3.
Oh, you'd be lucky. Yeah, I mean, my best was probably 5 or 6 in a day.
There you go.
But the thing is, the one thing that concerns me too about this and where this is heading is it slowly tearing the social fabric apart for human beings to socialise with each other.
Absolutely it is. And it's, you know, people are relying more on social media and TikToks and all this sort of shit. You know what I mean? Whatever the fuck that is.
TikToks.
So, shut up, Sam. So, you know, people are referring to those sort of things because that's the replacement.
Yeah.
That's the replacement. And you're right, the social fabric is changing. People can't communicate like they used to. Like you walk across the road and fucking every dickhead's on their phone, including me. I'm lost. I'm on a map. I don't know where I am. So,
but you get surprised how many people don't get hit by cars.
Yeah, I know.
They cross the road. They're staring at their phone. They've got their earbuds in. They can't see or hear anything.
Yeah,
it's a fucking joke.
So they've removed communication from the scenario. So the equation no longer contains that element, and they've replaced it with social media and TikTok and Facebook and all the other things. You know, they've replaced it. I think there's an advantage in it for some people, in that can be your point of difference, is that if not many people are doing it, and I'm saying what I'm referring to is just say the ability to build relationships.
Yeah.
If not many people are doing it, and in fact, it's actually against the grain for the way that the community is going, you actually start popping up even more because that becomes your point of difference, your ability to communicate. People still want to feel good, mate. You can't make someone feel good in a Zoom meeting.
No.
You know, like you might be able to have some sort of, it's a facade, you know, like it's not real. But as one-on-one, you can pick up the body language, you can identify, you can, you know, you shake their hands. I'm a hugger. I'll give you a hug. That's just my way. Now, through Zoom, that's not there.
No.
So if that becomes the norm, you know, that social interaction, the one-on-one social interaction, it becomes less and less. So I think it becomes, if you're thinking of it that way, it becomes more important to do it.
So in that aspect, you'd kind of take away from that being, use it as a tool, not necessarily the way of life and the norm going forward.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to things like social media and, you know, Instagram and Facebook and all this sort of stuff. So moving on from that, going into, I guess, back into your business in particular, what would be your biggest takeaways and I guess your biggest failures that you've learned from?
What I discussed, it was, I think that I could have done better with relationships.
Yep.
Built more quality ones, not waste. You know, you've got tire kickers in relationships, mate. You know, 5-minute friends, that sort of thing. I wanted to be friends with everybody. It's just impossible. You can't emotionally untangle all the fucking dramas with being friends with thousands of people. It's impossible. So I'd like to have thought that I could have identified the people who were in fact going to be quality for me personally, and spend more time on them and less time on, you know, the tire kickers around you. But that's more of a personality thing, I reckon. From a business sense, I just think at the moment small is better. There's too many moving parts in the business world at the moment. Too many changes that are happening both domestically and internationally. I think if you've got smaller businesses that you can bridle a lot quicker, and it's not going to run off on you and go out of control. When we've got these current hurdles that we're all experiencing, you can always keep your head above water. And I think if you get into it and you start getting too big too quick, things start getting out of your way, then we've got some fuck up like another COVID, say for example, and you can't control it, and then all of a sudden your legs get cut out from underneath you. I think those are the things that I've picked up over the years that I'd be far more aware of.
So if you were, so let me ask this then. So if you were going to start from scratch tomorrow, what would be, I guess, 3 things that you would focus on to grow your business?
First and foremost, why I want to do it. Why, not what, why. If it's I want to help people, okay, now I've got a bit of a direction as to what I want to do. Yeah. So in some way I'm going to be some form of service to people, okay? The next thing would be, okay, let's determine what sort of discipline you want to be involved in. Is it going to be law, property, developments, whatever you want to get involved in. So identify that and start off small. Start off small and build, because you can always build, you can always increase. And the thing is, once you start off small and you're doing things yourself, that gives you a far more better understanding of how things should be run when other people start doing that in your business.
So, and straight off the back of that, so for someone that is fresh in their business, so for instance, like my partner has an injectors clinic, she's opened up only a few months ago.
Yeah.
And she's having to do every aspect of that business at the moment. So would you recommend from your experience that it's much better off doing everything first before you delegate the task?
Absolutely. Because how can you, when someone else is doing it down the track, how can you identify whether or not they're doing a fuck good job or a good one? Because you don't have any markers to deal with. You don't have any boundaries that... Because if you're doing a job, it's been done well because it's your business and you've got ownership on the business. You know it's going to be done well. When someone else comes in as an employee, they're never going to want to do it as well as you've done it because it's not their baby.
Yeah.
Okay? And that's a human trait. I totally understand that. So when you're looking at them, unless you've done it properly, you don't get to sit back there and take pot shots on somebody them fucking up if you don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
And I think that's missed. People start straight away that all of a sudden they're starting to delegate, they're doing this and they're doing that, and it's only when things really go to shit they have a look at it, where they actually, if they had known that from the beginning, they would have identified the markers early on in the piece.
Yeah. And with your business as well, did you have any particular mentors that you conspired with?
Oh, absolutely. I took it, again, from totally different people. But as I said, I made sure that I didn't restrict it to... When I was in the police, I had just a lot of police friends, but when I went into law, I made sure that I kept my gambit of people very broad. So I took advice from other lawyers, people in property, doctors, good mates of mine from school, engineers, chippies, tradies. I took it from everybody and I took their advice because just because you haven't come across it yet doesn't mean that can definitely benefit you down the track. And that's what I found a lot. And it's sometimes a very simple, basic things. I got a really good mate still. He's a chippy and he's been doing it for years and years, very successful. But he's just got a very basic approach to things. And he said, mate, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. What are you fucking doing? But you need good friends like that to sort of give you a bit of a clip sometimes and say, go back in your lane a bit. But there's nothing wrong with that. It's just, but that's a learning curve and it's your capacity, your personality to have that ability to take that on board.
Yeah. And what would you say would be, I guess, your proudest achievement in time in law?
I think when I became a partner.
Yeah.
When I became a partner, because it was a recognition of all the work that you've done. I was getting taken seriously, but when you become a partner, that's the top level. you know, and I earned it too. It wasn't just handed to me. I'm not from a law family. We didn't have money, all that sort of stuff. So you do it all yourself, but I did it through relationships. So I think that was the proudest thing for me.
And like, talk briefly about that. How long did it take from you starting your first day in law to becoming a partner? Like how long?
About 4 years.
4 years.
Yeah.
Is that pretty quick in the law realm?
Look, it is, mate. But again, I had the added advantage of being a copper beforehand, and all of that sort of stuff. So I was probably ahead of the game from the get go.
Because you've gone from, I guess one side of that field to the complete opposite side, but still working in the same field.
And I'd already had time to develop a really good skill set.
Yeah. And what would you say was your biggest skill set?
Negotiating. Every day of the week.
So
every day of the week.
What would be your biggest tip for somebody that's in a negotiation right now in business? Say if they're trying to win over their biggest client, or they're trying to buy a company, or they're trying to advance and, say, buy another firm, for instance.
Yeah.
What would your recommendation be in the negotiation?
Find out why they want to do it first. It'll give you an understanding of what they're doing.
Yeah.
So if they're taking over a company, why they want to take it over? Oh, well, they've got that particular company is going to be a new wing of their business, say, for example. Well, that's the why, okay? So how important, then you've got to determine how important is it to them to get it. So you start developing your boundaries of negotiation. And once you've identified all those sort of things, talk to the person, and then we go back, listen to them, find out what's going on. You can extract so much information and not say a word. And then you're already 80% of the way there, and you haven't fucking opened your mouth.
So basically, talk less, listen more.
Spot on.
Yeah. So when it comes out of, I guess, negotiations and things like that, what would you think people would be most surprised to learn about you?
Oh, mate, I'm even though you go out there, you're in all the flash gear and all that sort of stuff, I'm a bloke from Ipswich. I'm a grub. I love it. I'm a country fella from Ipswich.
You're a basic fucker.
Yeah, mate. I love it. I love it. And, even though, you're playing the big circles sometimes, is that, mate, you know me, I love having a beer, putting shit on my mates. It means more to me than anything in the world. And having it thrown back at me. I love the banter. I love it. And I think sometimes when you're in professional scenarios, people don't pick that. Yeah. But when they see it, they go, oh, I wouldn't have picked that.
Yeah,
so,
right.
Yeah.
They go, oh, shit, it's another side to my didn't see.
Yeah, that's right.
And what keeps you inspired day to day to do what you do?
Family, mate.
Family.
I'm a dad at the moment. I focus. My daughter leaves. She just got a scholarship. Good old Finny. She'll be listening at the moment. She got a scholarship to go to the States to play water polo, and she's becoming a vet. So she leaves in August. So I want to spend as much time with her as I can, because we're a very tight family, and mate, I'll miss her terribly. But I just want to spend some quality time with her at the moment, because the likes of money in business, you can always make that, but you can't ever have the quality of, little kids. My little 4-year-old, gorgeous little thing, you'll turn around, she's 15. You can't have, you can't get those things back. Whereas in business and money, you can always make it. But those things and good friendships, I'm talking about proper, unadulterated, fully trusting relationships with your friends. They're worth $1 million every day of the week.
No, I totally agree with you. And it's like you said, tomorrow you can always build that back.
Yeah, spot on.
But you can't get back time.
Exactly right. Yeah. Exactly right.
So I guess what has been something that you thought in your career that you were going to really benefit from, but it turns out it was the complete opposite?
Buying a bar.
Buying a bar.
Fuck me.
So talk to me about that. How did that happen?
I went into it with a mate in the valley, bought a bar. It was fantastic. The flashiest thing you've ever seen.
Yeah.
Oh, it was just a hole in your pocket.
Yeah.
And mate, once you own a bar, I'm sorry, you become an alcoholic. And with all your friends around you, they're all going
to leech off you too. They're going to come over, drink, get pissed, 100%. Well, I have with you. I've come to your bar many times.
So, you know, like it's those things. That's the thing. But that was all that was I do it again. It's fun. And you got to have fun in life.
Yeah.
You got to have that recognition of fun. You don't want to be, you don't want to be the saddest prick in the graveyard. You want to have fun. And mate, if you're generous and you're a good guy, mate, I'll always shout my mates a drink. And it's not a tit for tat type thing. You want to see him enjoy it. He needs a beer. Clearly, he looks like he's in a prick of a mood. I'll fucking go get him one. Yeah. I love that. I really enjoy that. But I'm lucky. I haven't really had any real big regrets. I've been lucky, but I think that's also because I've always maintained a very, very positive person, and always had something on the go. Even now, I certainly won't talk about it now, but I've got irons in the fire on future businesses, as we're speaking about at the moment. And that's purely because of the relationships.
Is that in law or other?
No, nothing to do with law. This is it's just with finance and property. Right. But I've only got it because of the relationships that I had. That's it.
So and off that, like, what would be your words of advice that you would tell anybody to achieve what you've done? Listen.
Fucking listen. Stop talking. You're not that important. Fucking listen. And just because you got a flash suit, and the bullshit and all that sort of stuff, don't think that's the be all and end all, because if they take that away and you're not in the flash suit, the most articulate, smart, mate, severely advanced businessman I've ever come across, every time I have a beer with them, thongs, jeans, T-shirt. And they could buy everybody that's at that bar 100 times over, and they just look like fucking country hicks. And I love it. I think that's fantastic because they actually know what's real and what's not.
Correct. Yeah, they're not all about the bullshit of a flash car and a gold dunny.
Spot on.
Yeah.
Spot on.
So, I mean, in wrapping that up too, mate, what would be the summary or I guess the takeaway from this whole episode that someone's listening to this that you would like them to take away from you personally? If you had something to tell someone today, what would that be?
Well, I think the thing is, mate, is that people put, there's a big umbrella of the word business, say, for example, and business is anything that they're engaging in, that they give or they buy and they receive an asset or whatever the case is, or, business to business or whatever the purchase is. Law, for example, even police work, all of that sort of stuff is that you've got parties that are involved. I think people, if they actually just take the time to realise the people, the individuals they're dealing with, and not think that you've got fucking 5 minutes to impart all of this knowledge and bullshit on this poor bastard you're talking to, and have a chat to them, I think they would be, they'd be remarkably surprised as to how quick their business would go through the roof, simply because they're starting to harness the ability to develop relationships properly. I don't think anyone. Oh no, that's not fair. I don't think a lot of people put enough emphasis on relationships and the development and the nurturing of the relationships over periods of time. And that's not just business; that's personal and, with your wife and your kids, everyone. You've got to nurture it. You don't water it, it'll die. And that's like with anything in life. And that's probably the only bit of advice that, I've learned over 25 years. And I've got really good at it because I've fucking practiced it so often. And I continue to practice it, and I still continue to learn all the time.
So you're always learning no matter what?
Yeah, no matter what. No matter what, mate. And just be a good person. Like, don't be a prick. If you've got to turn it on for a reason, yeah, fair enough, I understand that, but don't use that as your get-go. That shouldn't be where you start from.
Yeah.
Escalate if you need to escalate, but, listen, be polite, be pleasant. And at the worst case scenario, someone leaves and they go, well, he seemed like a nice, pleasant guy. And that's the worst case scenario that you'd leave, it's a big art making people love you. It's a very hard art. And I'm not saying you want to make everyone love you, but it's a good thing.
Yeah.
If people really like you, so all of a sudden you're a really good guy that's got great empathy and compassion and who's extremely competent in his job, I'm sorry, you win every day of the week.
Yeah, yeah.
You win every day of the week.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's Adam Magill. Again, mate, want to thank you for coming on today,
Anytime,
mate.
brother.
I really appreciate that.
Thanks, mate.
Thank you for listening. Hopefully you've learned something from today's episode and know the next steps to focus on in your business. Want more resources to jumpstart your journey? Click the link in the show notes to see what else I have to offer and book a call with myself to jumpstart your business and make shit happen. I specialize in helping people turn their passion into six-figure businesses to replace your 9-to-5 through online education and high-ticket coaching. If this is something that interests you, you can reach out to me through any of my social media outlets in the description below.